That is what my interlocutor was forgetting as he questioned me on the theater of tomorrow. Perhaps he too was unconsciously playing on the meaning of the word possible. Hamlet was doubtless possible before being realized, if that means that there was no insurmountable obstacle to its realization. In this particular sense, one calls possible what is not impossible, and it stands to reason that this non-impossibility of a thing is a condition of its realization. But the possible, thus understood, is in no degree virtual, something ideally pre-existent. If you close the gate, you know that no one will cross the road. It does not follow that you can predict who will cross when you open it. Nevertheless, from the quite negative sense of the term impossible, you pass surreptitiously, unconsciously to the positive sense. Possibility signified absence of hindrance a few minutes ago. Now you make of it a pre-existence under the form of an idea, which is quite another thing. In the first meaning of the word, it was a truism to say that the possibility of a thing precedes its reality. By that you meant simply that obstacles, having been surmounted, were surmountable. But, in the second meaning, it is an absurdity, for it is clear that a mind in which the Hamlet of Shakespeare had taken shape in the form of possible would have been in fact created, would by that fact have created its reality. It would thus have been by definition Shakespeare himself. In vain do you imagine at first that this mind could have appeared before Shakespeare. It is because you are not thinking then of all the details in the play. As you complete them, the predecessor of Shakespeare finds himself thinking all that Shakespeare will think, feeling all that he will feel, knowing all he will know, perceiving therefore all he will perceive, and consequently occupying the same point in space and time, having the same body and the same soul. It is Shakespeare himself. But I am putting too much stress on what is self-evident. We are forced to these considerations in discussing a work of art. I believe in the end we shall consider it evident that the artist in executing a work is creating the possible as well as the real. Whence comes it, then, that one might hesitate to say the same thing for nature? Is not the world a work of art incomparably richer than that of the greatest artist? And is there not as much absurdity, if not more, in supposing, in the work of nature, that the future is outlined in advance, that possibility existed before reality? Once more, let me say I am perfectly willing to admit that the future states of a closed system of material points are calculable and hence visible in its present state. But, and I repeat, this system is extracted, or abstracted, from a whole which, in addition to inert and unorganized matter, comprises organization. Take the concrete and complete world, with the life and consciousness it encloses. Consider nature in its entirety. Nature, the generator of these species, is novel and original in form as the design of any artist. In these species, concentrate upon individuals, plants or animals, each of which has its own character. I was going to say its personality, for one blade of grass does not resemble another blade of grass any more than a Raphael resembles a Rembrandt. Lift your attention above and beyond individual man to societies which disclose actions and situations comparable to those of any drama. How can one still speak of possibles which would precede their own realization? How can we fail to see that if the event can always be explained afterwards by an arbitrary choice of antecedent events, a completely different event could have been equally well explained in the same circumstances by another choice of antecedent, nay, by the same antecedents otherwise cut out, otherwise distributed, otherwise perceived, in short, by our retrospective attention, backwards, over the course of time, a constant remodeling of the past by the present, of the cause by the effect, is being carried out. We do not see it, always for the same reason, always a prey to the same illusion, always because we treat as more what is less. We treat as the more what is the less, as the less what is the more. If we put the possible back into its proper place, evolution becomes something quite different from the realization of a program. The gates of the future open wide. Freedom is offered on unlimited field. The fault of those doctrines, rare indeed in the history of philosophy, which have succeeded in leaving room for indetermination and freedom in the world, is to have failed to see what their affirmation implied. When they spoke of indetermination, of freedom, they meant by indetermination a competition between possibles, by freedom a choice between possibles, as if possibility was not created by freedom itself. As if any other hypothesis, by affirming an ideal pre-existence of the possible to the real, did not reduce the new to a mere rearrangement of former elements. As if it were not thus to be led sooner or later to regard that arrangement as calculable and foreseeable. By accepting the premise of the contrary theory, one was letting the enemy in. We must resign ourselves to the inevitable. It is the real which makes itself possible, and not the possible which makes itself real. But the truth is that philosophy has never frankly admitted this continuous creation of unforeseeable novelty. The ancients already revolted against it, because, Platonists to a greater or less degree, they imagined that being was given once and for all, complete and perfect, in the immutable system of ideas. The world which unfolds before our eyes could therefore add nothing to it. It was, on the contrary, only diminution or degradation, its successive states measured as it were the increasing or decreasing distance between what is, a shadow projected in time, and what ought to be. Idea set in eternity, they would outline the variations of a deficiency, the changing form of a void. It was time which, according to them, spoiled everything. The moderns, it is true, take a very different point of view. They no longer treat time as an intruder, a disturber of eternity, but they would very much like to reduce it to a simple appearance. The temporal is, then, only the confused form of the rational. What we perceive as being a succession of states is conceived by our intellect, once the fog has settled, as a system of relations. The real becomes once more the eternal, with this single difference, that it is the eternity of the laws, in which the phenomena are resolved instead of being the eternity of the ideas, which serve them as models. But in each case we are dealing with theories. Let us stick to the facts. Time is immediately given. That is sufficient for us, and until its inexistence or perversity is proved to us, we shall merely register that there is effectively a flow of unforeseeable novelty. Philosophy stands to gain in finding some absolute in the moving world of phenomena, but we shall gain also in our feeling of greater joy and strength. Greater joy, because the reality invented before our eyes will give each one of us unceasingly certain of the satisfactions which art at rare intervals procures for the privileged. It will reveal to us, beyond the fixity and monotony of ours, which our senses, hypnotized by our constant needs, at first perceived in it, ever-recurring novelty, the moving originality of things. But above all, we shall have greater strength, for we shall feel we are participating, creators of ourselves, in the great work of creation, which is the origin of all things, and which goes on before our eyes. By getting hold of itself, our faculty for acting will become intensified. Humbled heretofore is an attitude of obedience, slaves of certain vaguely felt natural necessities. We shall once more stand erect, masters associated with a greater master. To such a conclusion will our study bring us. In this speculation on the relation between the possible and the real, let us guard against seeing a simple game. It can be a preparation for the art of living.